Val Kilmer appeared on the April Fool's Day 1992 episode of Later with Bob Costas. The conversation focused upon his portrayal of Jim Morrison in Oliver Stone's film The Doors, and his portrayal of a Native American of which he is of descent in the film Thunderheart with Sam Shepard. So pretty cool Val Kilmer interview. Apologize for the little fleck marks here and there. Maybe we'll try cooking this tape and redoing it.
Thanks for staying up later. Val Kilmer is with us tonight, and his film Thunderheart, which also stars Sam Shepard, opens in early April. We'll talk about that in just a bit, but I would imagine that any interview you do, or if somebody stops you on the street, usually the first thing they want to talk about is your portrayal of Jim Morrison in The Doors, right? Although you had to dye your hair and you had to get it permed to look more like Morrison, so the resemblance isn't nearly as striking when you're sitting here as your real self, but it came so close it was almost amazing. Thanks. In the film.
Some things that, because it's over a pretty long period of time, doesn't really feel like that somehow because it's not really a linear plot, it's sort of circular. But some of the experiments we did with the makeup or beards and that were more disturbing when we were trying to find it because such an extreme change. It got really heavy and beard sort of helped.
Yeah, you had to do almost what De Niro did to play LaMotta in Raging Bull. You had to put on 30, 40 pounds to play him toward the end, right?
Well, yeah, half of that was not difficult because I'd lost a lot of weight. So I just ate my way through the filming of it. I think that De Niro took time off and went away to Italy and gorged his way across Europe.
I understand you really wanted this part. There are stories about the lengths that you went to get the part, to impress Oliver Stone that you were the guy that could be Jim
Someone
Morrison.
said I camped in his house in the yard, which I have no memory of doing, but I met him real early on. He was maybe going to do this movie and maybe not. He was negotiating for another film that he'd been caught up in for a long time. So I had enough time to prepare for it, and I didn't find any other way but assuming that I was doing it and then start on all the work. He didn't know which songs, so I have to learn the songs, and I didn't want to do the movie if it was going to be a 2-hour rock video and just lip-syncing because it doesn't work, ever. As good as Bette Midler is in The Rose, she's fantastic, is what she does for a living, and you can tell. Maybe not, you know, maybe it's perfectly edited, but there's something, it's just a little bit different. You know, which I'm sure she would say, too. You try to give that feeling, but it's very hard to do, performing live. So I had a lot of work to do anyway. And one of the things I did was make a video so that I could find out how I looked older and how, just to do the work so that if at the time I was doing it, it wasn't even definite there was a film. And Oliver likes a fight, and it was an army of people to negotiate with. It was really huge. I think there's 8 producers on it. Everybody owned something. And 3 film companies, and so all that was happening, and I guess any one of those not working out could have made the film not happen.
How did you capture the music or the concert scenes? How much of that were... how much were you listening? I know you had a molded earpiece. How much were you listening to an instrumental track? How much was actual music being played around you on stage? How did it work?
Oh, I don't know. It depends. Sometimes it would be a technical thing that would be what would be the task. You just have to know them so deeply that, like acting, you're not thinking about what the words are, but what you don't know, what you're trying to find out. So words just come to you, and sometimes you do different tricks depending on the kind of scene and they are tricks, to make that fresh. But I found it easy with the music and singing because unlike Shakespeare, where you have to create the meter and the bass line and you have to create a whole orchestra sound with just your own facility, with the music, it's there doing it, and then the audience reaction of the music changing, that was the only problem was that it was a strict playback because we were using Doors live tracks without Morrison's vocal. So I had some freedom, sometimes not, because his would bleed off into the speakers. Kind of complicated, but what we managed to do is give a feeling of live, and that was probably the most fun thing about where the performances, in that the audience didn't get tired of hearing half of Light My Fire or the end all day long. And they still enjoyed Memory Lane, Rock Frenzy. And the first AD once, they had hired some women and men to be naked in it. So he just went to, you know, let them know that this next shot was when we were going to do that. So he said, okay, when you see the sign of 3, take off your clothes. And about 1,000 people did. They, like, the audience thought that he was instructing them, so they just responded immediately.
They were willing, at least.
And that was part of the point of the story, too, is with what happens to someone that has that responsibility or demands it and then gets it. You know, what do you do with that kind of power?
How much of a sense do you think you got, and this is always imprecise, but through all those scenes with him on stage and trying to capture the power that he had over an audience, how much of a sense do you think you personally got of what it must have been like to be on stage in that era and to be him?
Well, with the way Oliver directs and then the experience with the music and the concert, I think it was always the feeling for me was the same as what it was. We were in a small club where no one cares, then doing it for the music and turn to the band, and so that's what it felt like, because that's what I was doing. And it was the music, so, and nothing we saw or felt at the, very important to Oliver's mood, which a lot of directors strangely don't. They forget why you're there, so they don't bring the mood in. The crew really loves him and, you know, like the experience. So mostly I think it wasn't, I didn't need to reflect what was it like back then, because people don't take their clothes off if they feel like it in a concert now. Maybe they do. I haven't been to a concert in a while, but that's what people were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And uncontrollable stuff, which Oliver wanted. And then we had 12 cameras to capture it. You know, when we were recording, the microphone was the same microphone. The engineer was the same engineer. The song's the same song. Rothschild would sometimes forget and call me Jim, and I was doing his voice all the time, and I looked like him, or I'd just come from a costume fitting, so I literally looked like him. And we started arguing about the song, and he'd say, stop it, stop it, stop it, and take me outside and say, no, don't do that, because I'm losing my mind right now. And I say, well, why? He said, just don't do him, don't do him right now. I said, I'm not doing him, that's what I feel we should do with the song. And then he would say, well, that's like a Jim quote, you know, things that seemed logical and that I also felt personally about how to do a song or whatever.
One element that was distinctive about the Doors, in a lot of their best songs, there were these long instrumental bridges. In fact, a lot of the songs had shorter versions for AM play and longer album versions that FM played, and they were like these long, languid, almost dreamlike bridges where people could go off on, with their own imaginations and put any interpretation on it they wanted.
Yeah, Morrison was very, very blues and jazz in that styles, and the band was that they would like to play in those areas, and that's something that I would have liked to have had a chance to do more of, in that the style is quite, there's a lot of slam cuts and a lot of action in the movement of the camera that, or just getting right to the point, getting to that peak in the song. But part of their drama, their stage presence, was that Morrison would sit or stand, you know, for an hour and a half with his eyes closed. And then that one break in the end, or that one song that was the peak of their show, the third act moment, you know, when Oedipus gets his eyes gone, you know, then he would go mad, and that sort of energy would build to it.
Didn't you wear special contacts or some sort of device
Sometimes
you used
for the stone sequences, some of them to blast the eyes.
How long did that take to get adjusted to?
I never did, but part of that made it you know, it was another acting trick I didn't have to worry about because I looked like I was out of my mind, and I was.
So how did it work? There were like a hole in them, and you only saw half? Or?
I think they cut golf balls in half. That's what it felt like giant grapefruit inside my eyes. Yeah, they take out the middle so I could see, but somehow they were very thick. Or covered the whole eye. That's what it was. So they were very large.
Before The Doors, even though you had some Shakespearean background and everything, not that many people see that. So before The Doors, your reputation was more or less, here's a young guy, he's in these action things, but you had no significant reputation to the public at large as a quality actor. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was just before The Doors. Mainly what I've done is theater, and most satisfying experiences have been theater, and I was becoming very frustrated because I don't know how actors that are my age get their jobs, but I wasn't near them somehow. I wasn't getting a script. It was a real situation. Not that The Doors is a real situation, which is kind of grand ideas, but a good solid role to play. So I kind of think that was the first one. When I consider what I've done, that's what it feels like. It was the first acting job in movies.
April, Thunderheart will be released. Sam Shepard is also in the movie. Now, I know you have some Cherokee ancestry. I'm not sure how much. And you play an Indian in this film,
right.
A Sioux Indian, who is a lawyer, and then I guess gets back in touch.
Yeah, he's a federal agent that is given the assignment to solve a murder with the head of that area. And that's Sam Shepard, and Graham Greene, who is so fine in Dances with Wolves, is an Indian cop on the reservation who keeps leading me toward the truth of the crime. And I discover that it's a scam to identify the head of an Indian movement, pin him with the crime, and get him off the reservation, that that's really why we're there, and find a spiritual awakening through, and moral awakening by the experience that I have on the reservation.
I'm not coming out unless you've got a warrant, and you're trespassing on my property, so hit the road, Chief.
How connected to your own Indian heritage had you been prior to this? Was it a part of your life?
Big part. My family spent a lot of time in Arizona when I was growing up, and my grandfather was a gold prospector in New Mexico, so we used to go there every summer, and, you know, sort of novice anthropologists, but also the romance. My father grew up on reservations and up in the mountains there were no fences or defined areas. And he grew up inside of that culture, so a lot of his stories, that instead of Grimm's fairy tales, we got told real American stories. I grew up with that romance and love of the desert and a lot of the principles that Indians exemplify really beautifully about living in balance and respect, family, and all those things.
You were in something called Gore Vidal's Billy the Kid, obviously Vidal's take on an American legend. And we went back to a little research, and the New York Times at that point said you resembled a young Marlon Brando. You must have heard about that.
I think Gore said that, and they...
Your press agent said that, and they dutifully took it down. When you hear something like that, it's got to turn your head, huh?
I love Billy the Kid. I always have. And as I said, my grandfather grew up somewhat in those areas, and what he told my father was that you had to go way around some of these canyons and all that Lincoln County, because it was really, really hole-in-the-wall gang style of living, and people didn't... My grandfather apparently was involved in a big shootout because you couldn't afford to find out if someone was a good person or a bad person. And just... Also, Billy the Kid was one of the first superstars in our country that was abstract to patriotism. It was always something to do with our country in that way, and he was outside of the realm in that he was a hero, but an anti-hero.
Shifting gears here, you met your wife when you were making Willow, the Ron Howard film, right?
Yeah, we actually had been cast together in 2 other films that had fallen apart. So by the time we met on that one, we kind of knew of each other, but never had worked together. And it turned out during the course of the filming, found out that she was a young woman that I had been in love with. She was in this play, and I'd forgotten her name, but it used to go second act. This play that was at the Royal Court around the corner from where I lived when I did Top Secret. And it was her, this woman that I couldn't take my eyes off of. But
and you went
I'm
several,
bad with names, so I didn't
times?
realize it was her. Yeah, over and over and over again.
And you would get there in the second act?
Well, yeah, to see her in this play.
And you didn't remember her name, and so even when you saw the name and you were cast together, it didn't click until...
Yeah. I was trying to impress her, and I said something obscure about some theory in physics, and she understood what it was and then went sort of further in the line of thinking. I said, that's quite amazing. Are you a fan of physics? And she said, no, I played this physicist in this play. And I said, that was you. That was you in that body stocking.
You know, you can usually impress a girl if you can bring up Werner von Braun. You know, if you can just toss Werner von Braun into the conversation.
Do you happen to know how
Enrico Fermi, if you can work that in there,
I tried everything.
It's good stuff.
I tried everything. She just was not interested. She was very professional, and I gave up. And after we wrapped Willow, then I said, well, okay, how about Africa? Would you like to go to Africa or anywhere in the world? And she said, well, maybe. And then I said, well, how about marriage? Would marriage be good? And she said yes. So I married her.
With this, we're talking about Thunderheart coming out in early April, and almost at the same time, right now you're in rehearsals for it, and it should be just about set about the same time, 'Tis Pity She's a Whore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a first Jacobean tragedy the public's ever done. I guess Joe Papp didn't find them appealing.
Public theater here in New York.
And Joanne Ecolitis is directing it, who's now the artistic director there. And she's amazing. I've never had more fun. I don't know, what's another word for fun?
A good time.
She's really exciting to work with, and her dreams for the public are fantastic. She thinks it should be the public theater and wants to do more free theater and a more kind of a larger scope, poetry and music, and to make it a place where you know that you can go and have an interesting evening, and it doesn't cost $200 like Broadway. I'm excited. There's a lot of shows opening on Broadway, but really, I work for Joanne any time. What she's going for in her theater anyway, very ambitious and vital, and the play's quite that. And I get to kill everyone at the end, so sort of a nice way to end the evening.
'Tis Pity She's a Whore is a play which is almost 500 years old, but they can move it into different settings, and in this case, it's the 1930s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, set in fascist Italy.
In Mussolini's Italy in the 30s.
Right, so you're big on the Girl Scouts, and I do remember this name with a C in it, De Circio. Do you know this artist? That's the kind of canvas of it, and all the futurists of that time. There are modern futurists, but the original bunch were all fascists, and their principles and ideas about art are reflected into decay and sort of honoring the body and images of destruction before the world had those images out of World War II, and that's kind of the environment of the extreme decadence where fine forms of women are not what becomes the interesting thing after hours, but the destruction, which is something, unfortunately, we seem to be heading toward, and why it's quite interesting to be involved in a play, which is a safe environment to examine these ideas.
Look for Val Kilmer in Thunderheart with Sam Shepard. It was good to see you.
You too.
Enjoyed meeting you. Thanks. We're gone for now. See you later.